July 14th, 2026. Somewhere over the Persian Gulf, the sky lit up in streaks of fire. Not one missile, not two. Waves of them. Short-range ballistic missiles arcing upward from the Shahed province in southern Iran, their exhaust trails cutting across the night sky in footage that looks more like the opening sequence of a war film than a live news broadcast. Except this is not a film. The missiles are real. The targets are real. And as of this morning, American forces across the Middle East spent the night staring at radar screens, watching inbound Iranian ballistic munitions and asking themselves the same question every military commander dreads. How many are we going to stop? And how many are going to hit something? That is where we are right now. That is the world on July 14th, 2026. But let's back all the way up, because to understand what just happened, you need to understand what has been building, and why the events of the past 72 hours represent something the Middle East has not seen in decades. It started with the American strikes, the ones on Sunday. The ones that, depending on who you ask, were either a long overdue military response to years of Iranian aggression or the opening act of a regional war that nobody has a map for. What we know for certain is that U.S. forces, using fighter jets, naval vessels, aerial attack drones, and for the first time in documented operational history, one-way attack sea drones, struck targets across Iran in a wave of precision strikes that CENTCOM described as hitting dozens of targets at multiple locations. Radar sites, air defense systems, missile capabilities, drone launch infrastructure. The message was not ambiguous. The United States was not firing warning shots. They were systematically dismantling Iran's ability to continue doing what Iran had been doing to international shipping flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. That is the backdrop, the immediate context. But the situation that produced those American strikes did not begin on Sunday. It began months earlier, years earlier if you trace the logic properly. And that thread is the thing that most coverage keeps skipping over. Iran's campaign against commercial shipping in and around the Strait of Hormuz had been escalating in both frequency and sophistication for an extended period before the United States made the decision to respond with direct military force. The Houthis in Yemen, acting as an Iranian-aligned proxy force, had already conducted repeated attacks on merchant vessels. Iranian small boats had harassed shipping. Iranian military assets had been used to seize and threaten commercial traffic moving through one of the most strategically critical choke points on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz is not a secondary trade route. Approximately 20% of the world's oil supply transits through that narrow passage. What flows through Hormuz keeps economies running on every continent. When that corridor becomes a war zone, the consequences do not stay in the Persian Gulf. They move through global energy markets within hours. The United States watched this campaign unfold. They issued warnings. They conducted smaller-scale defensive operations. And at some point, someone in the chain of command made the determination that defensive operations were no longer sufficient, that the only way to stop Iran from attacking shipping was to destroy Iran's capacity to do so. That determination produced Sunday's strikes, and now Iran has responded. Here is the confirmed picture as of July 14th. At least 6 short-range ballistic missiles were launched from JAM, located in the Shahed province of southern Iran, directed at U.S. positions in Bahrain. That is a confirmed minimum. The actual salvo may have been larger. The missiles targeted U.S. forces at positions that include the headquarters of the United States Navy's 5th Fleet, one of the most critical American military command nodes in the entire region. The nerve center through which the United States projects naval power across the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the Red Sea. Multiple bases across the broader Middle East also came under fire during the same overnight period. Muwafaq, Salty Air Base in Jordan, which has been a recurring target in Iranian-aligned attacks over the past year, was hit again by Iranian ballistic missiles. Missile trails were observed from both northwestern and southern Iran simultaneously, indicating coordinated launches from geographically dispersed positions, a deliberate dispersal strategy designed to complicate American interception calculations. And this is the part that nobody in the casual conversation about this conflict is stopping to process properly. When Iran launches ballistic missiles from geographically separated positions at the same time, they are not doing it randomly. They are doing it because a single point of origin is easier to track, easier to target for counter-battery fire, and easier for defensive systems to calculate intercept solutions against. Multiple simultaneous launch points from multiple provinces means the defending side has to solve multiple intercept problems at once, while also managing radar coverage across a much wider geographic area. That is not a technical footnote. That is an operational signal about how seriously Iran is prosecuting this response. This is not a face-saving gesture. This is a coordinated military operation. The damage picture at the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain remains difficult to fully assess. What is confirmed is that there were what appeared to be significant explosions in the area. Whether those were direct missile impacts, intercepted warheads detonating in proximity, or some combination of both, is not something that can be stated with certainty based on the available footage and reporting. What can be stated is that the 5th Fleet Headquarters was deliberately targeted, and the choice of that specific target tells you something important about Iranian strategic thinking. Hitting the 5th Fleet's command headquarters is not the same as hitting a radar installation or a forward operating base. It is an attempt to strike at the brain of American naval operations in the Gulf. If you want to understand how serious Iran is treating this exchange, start there. Read that again. Iran targeted the headquarters of the 5th Fleet. Not a peripheral asset, not a logistics depot. The command headquarters. That decision did not come from a low-level military planner. That decision came from the very top of the Iranian military structure, and it represents a calculated risk that whoever authorized it understood could produce one of two outcomes. Either it sends a message powerful enough to force a negotiated pause, or it guarantees an American escalation that Iran may not be fully prepared to absorb. There is no middle ground in that choice, and the fact that it was made anyway tells you everything about where Iranian leadership currently assesses their strategic position. Now let's talk about the hardware, because the weapon systems involved in these exchanges are not just military equipment. They are messages written in metal and propellant. The Iranian short-range ballistic missiles fired toward Bahrain are part of Iran's most mature and indigenously developed capability set. Iran has spent decades, through international sanctions and international isolation, building a domestic ballistic missile program that is now one of the most extensive in the region. These are not improvised weapons. They are precision instruments with genuine range, genuine warhead capacity, and genuine guidance systems capable of hitting specific target coordinates. When the IRGC fires ballistic missiles, they are not firing them and hoping. They are firing at targets they have mapped, calculated, and preloaded into guidance packages. The sophistication level matters because it changes the nature of the threat. A random rocket attack is a harassment tool. A coordinated ballistic missile salvo against a specific command headquarters is a strike operation. The Shahed drone that appeared in footage heading toward American positions represents a different but equally important dimension of Iran's arsenal. The Shahed series attack drones are one-way kamikaze platforms. They are not designed to return. They are designed to find their target and detonate. These systems have already proven their battlefield utility in other conflicts, where Iranian-supplied Shaheds have been used extensively, and what makes them particularly problematic, from a defensive standpoint, is their unit economics. Intercepting a Shahed drone with a surface-to-air missile costs several orders of magnitude more than the Shahed drone itself costs to produce and launch. Iran can sustain a drone campaign at a cost structure that is fundamentally more affordable than the American and Allied cost of defending against it. That asymmetry is not an accident. It is a deliberate strategic design. On the American side, the weapons picture is equally revealing. CENTCOM strikes used U.S. fighter jets, naval vessels, one-way attack aerial drones, and one-way attack sea drones. That last category is the one that deserves specific attention. This is the confirmed first use of one-way attack sea drones against Iranian targets. Sea-based autonomous attack platforms operating in surface and near-surface profiles represent a new operational dimension in how the United States can prosecute strikes in a literal environment like the Persian Gulf. Unlike aircraft, sea drones do not require pilot exposure. Unlike missiles, they can be produced and deployed at scale with different cost considerations. They can operate in environments where airspace is contested and where subsurface approaches create targeting complications for adversary systems. The fact that CENTCOM deployed them here is not incidental. It is a signal that the United States is prepared to bring its full range of available platforms to bear, including capabilities that have not previously been used in this theater. The ATACMS system captured on video flying toward Iran is another data point worth dwelling on. The Army Tactical Missile System is a long-range precision ground-launched munition capable of striking targets at distances that fundamentally change the geography of this conflict. When ATACMS are in play, Iranian positions that were previously outside the threat envelope of certain U.S. ground-based systems are no longer safe. The footage of an ATACMS in flight heading toward Iranian territory is not just dramatic video content. It is evidence of the operational reach that American forces are bringing to this fight. And it tells the Iranians that distance and geography alone are not a sufficient defensive buffer. The CENTCOM statement released following the July 12th strikes lays out the operational intent in language that is officially precise, but strategically revealing in ways that the official framing tries to minimize. CENTCOM stated that the strikes were designed to degrade Iran's ability to continue attacking international shipping flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. They listed the specific target categories: Iranian military air defense systems, radar sites, missile and drone capabilities, and small boats. They specified the platforms used: U.S. fighter jets, naval vessels, one-way attack aerial drones, and one-way attack sea drones. And they noted that the strikes hit dozens of targets at multiple locations. Break that down properly. Dozens of targets. multiple locations, air defense systems, radar, missiles, drones, small boats. That is not a surgical warning strike. That is a systematic campaign to blind, disarm, and degrade an adversary's entire layered capability structure. Air defense systems gone means Iran cannot protect its airspace as effectively in subsequent rounds. Radar sites destroyed means Iran's situational awareness is degraded. They lose eyes across their own territory and across the waters they have been using to harass shipping. Missile and drone capabilities struck means the launchers, the storage, the infrastructure that supports the offensive operations against Hormuz shipping. Small boats targeted means the fast attack craft that Iran has used for decades as a harassment and swarming tool against naval vessels in the Gulf. Every single target category on that list is connected to a specific Iranian operational capability. CENTCOM was not hitting random infrastructure. They were conducting what military planners call effects-based targeting, identifying the specific systems that produce the adversarial capability you want to eliminate, then systematically destroying each one. And here is where the operational picture gets significantly more complex. The Strait of Hormuz, as of July 14th, is effectively closed to normal commercial traffic. Vessel tracking data via marine traffic shows that over the past 24-hour period, fewer than 5 merchant vessels completed the full transit. 5. In a corridor that under normal conditions sees dozens of vessels per day. The actual number of vessels transiting may be marginally higher because some ships have disabled their automatic identification systems, their AIS transponders, either because their operators are trying to move without announcing their position, or because the vessels operating in the area are already non-commercial in nature. Either way, the commercial maritime picture in the Strait of Hormuz right now is as close to a complete shutdown as the modern era has produced in that waterway. That is not just a military story. That is an economic story with consequences that will ripple through global energy markets, global shipping costs, and global supply chains. Every day the Strait of Hormuz operates below capacity represents billions of dollars in disrupted trade flows. Oil and gas shipments that would normally transit toward Asian markets are either being rerouted at enormous cost. The alternative, Cape of Good Hope routing, adds weeks and massive fuel expense to voyage times, or they are sitting anchored in Gulf waters waiting for a security picture that has not emerged. The financial pressure building from this single variable is not theoretical. It is real, it is quantifiable, and it is accumulating every hour. Now let's talk about the 3 simultaneous pressure tracks that are converging right now, because the dangerous thing about this moment is not any single element in isolation. The dangerous thing is the convergence, financial pressure. The Strait of Hormuz shutdown is already affecting global energy prices. Insurance premiums for vessels anywhere near the Gulf have spiked to levels that make commercial transit economically irrational for many operators. Shippers are making decisions in real time about whether to move cargo and absorb the cost, whether to wait and absorb the delay, or whether to reroute and absorb the longer transit time. None of those options are cheap. All of them cascade. And Iran, whose own economy is already battered by years of sanctions, is not immune to the economic consequences of a region where commerce has effectively stopped. The question is, whose economy can absorb the pressure longer? And the history of sanctions and isolation has actually prepared Iran's leadership, if not its population, to operate under conditions of economic siege. Military pressure. The systematic destruction of Iranian air defense systems, radar installations, and offensive missile and drone infrastructure is not just reducing Iran's immediate operational capability. It is forcing Iran to make hard choices about when and how to use the capabilities it has remaining. Every radar site destroyed is a gap in Iran's air picture. Every air defense system taken out is a corridor through which American aircraft can now operate with reduced interception risk. Every missile launcher struck is a reduction in the volley size of Iran's future barrages. The Iranians know this, and the knowledge that your defensive and offensive systems are being systematically cataloged and eliminated creates a specific form of military pressure that is distinct from the immediate physical damage. It is the pressure of watching your deterrent capability erode in real time. Psychological pressure. Iran scrambled its fighter jets in response to the American strikes over Tehran. Let that image sit for a moment. Iranian fighter jets rising to defend Iranian airspace, and the reports indicate those jets were no match for the engagement. The aircraft Iran has available are a patchwork of aging platforms, some dating back to before the 1979 revolution, supplemented by more recent acquisitions that remain limited in number and capability compared to what the United States can bring to bear. When Iranian pilots launch into contested airspace against American air power, the outcome calculus is not favorable for Iran. The leadership in Tehran knows this, and the psychological weight of launching a military response that, you know, at the aircraft level, cannot produce air superiority over your own territory. That is a particular kind of pressure that shapes decision-making in ways that don't always appear in official statements. Now, let's go inside the command structure, because the public face of Iran's response and the actual decision-making architecture behind it are not the same thing. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, is the operational engine of Iran's military response. Not the regular Iranian army, not the navy in its conventional sense. The IRGC, which is a parallel military structure that was created specifically to protect the ideological integrity of the Islamic Republic, and which answers through a chain of command that runs through the Supreme Leader's office rather than through conventional government ministries. The IRGC's Aerospace Force is the branch responsible for the ballistic missile launches. The IRGC's Navy is the branch that operates the small, fast attack boats that have been used to harass shipping in the Gulf. The IRGC's drone programs produce the Shahed platforms now flying toward American positions. Understanding this command architecture matters because it means that the decision to fire ballistic missiles at the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet did not go through the same institutional channels as a decision made by a conventional national military. The IRGC chain of command is ideologically filtered in ways that conventional military chains of command are not. Career advancement within the IRGC is tied not just to military competence, but to revolutionary ideological commitment, which means the institutional culture of the organization producing these launches includes incentive structures that weigh symbolic defiance of the United States as a positive value independent of its strategic utility. At the nominal apex of the command structure sits Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Every major military decision of this magnitude requires, at minimum, his authorization. But authorization is not the same as operational design. The operational design, the selection of specific targets, the choice of weapon systems, the timing and geographic dispersal of the launches, that comes from the IRGC command layer. And within that layer, there are competing institutional interests, competing assessments of how far to push the current confrontation, and competing calculations about what the Iranian public and the wider Muslim world will perceive as an adequate response versus a humiliating insufficiency. That internal tension between the need to demonstrate strength to a domestic audience that has been told for decades that Iran will not be intimidated, and the operational reality of facing an adversary with overwhelming air power superiority is the most dangerous dynamic in this entire situation. Because it creates pressure toward escalation that comes not from a calm, strategic calculation that escalation will produce a better outcome, but from institutional and political survival needs that have their own momentum. The Yemen dimension that emerged in the overnight period adds another layer to an already complicated picture. Reports emerged that an airport in Sana'a, Yemen, under Houthi control, was struck around the same time as an Iranian delegation was reportedly traveling to Yemen to meet with Houthi leadership. If that report is accurate, and it needs to carry the appropriate uncertainty weight because verification in the Yemen theater is genuinely difficult, then the strike on that airport may represent an attempt to disrupt Iranian Houthi coordination at a moment when both parties were potentially synchronizing their response operations. Iran and the Houthis functioning as a coordinated axis in this conflict is not a new dynamic. What would be new is a direct American attempt to physically interrupt an in-person coordination meeting by striking the venue. What that would signal, if accurate, is a level of real-time intelligence penetration of Iranian delegation movements that is operationally significant in its own right. Knowing where an Iranian diplomatic delegation is moving, at what time, through which airport, that is not casual intelligence. That is either signals intelligence at a very high level of access, or it represents human intelligence assets placed close enough to the Iranian decision-making apparatus to know itinerary details. Either possibility has implications that extend well beyond the specific airstrike itself. The strikes continuing as of July 14th hit additional Iranian territory. Qeshm Island took impacts this morning. Bandar Abbas, a strategically critical port city on Iran's southern coast and a major node in Iran's maritime operations, saw bombs falling. The village of Jabroni was struck, and the Khuzestan deputy governor confirmed that U.S. forces struck 3 specific points in Abadan at 13:45 local time on July 13th, with at least one person reported injured at the time the statement was made, and further damage assessments described as ongoing. Abadan, Qeshm Island, Bandar Abbas. Look at those 3 locations on a map, and you see something important. They are not random geographic distribution. Abadan sits at the northern end of the Persian Gulf, near the Iraq border, close to critical petrochemical infrastructure. Qeshm Island sits inside the Strait of Hormuz itself, in the narrow throat of the passage that is at the center of this entire conflict. Bandar Abbas is Iran's primary southern port and a key logistics hub for IRGC naval operations. These are not peripheral targets. These are nodes in the network that Iran uses to project maritime power and control in the Gulf region. Striking all 3 in the same operational period suggests a targeting map that is highly specific about what capabilities the United States is trying to eliminate. Not simply Iran's military infrastructure in the abstract, but specifically the infrastructure that enables Iran's campaign against Hormuz shipping. The honest strategic assessment of where things stand on July 14th is this. The United States has demonstrated a willingness to conduct sustained multi-wave precision strikes against a wide range of Iranian military targets on Iranian sovereign territory. Iran has responded with ballistic missile salvos against American military positions in Bahrain and Jordan. Neither side has shown any indication of pausing. American counterstrikes were already underway, while Iranian missiles were still in the air from the overnight barrage. That simultaneous exchange, strikes going out while missiles are coming in, is not the rhythm of a situation moving toward a negotiated pause. That is the rhythm of an active military confrontation with its own momentum. What the mainstream coverage keeps treating as a series of dramatic but ultimately bounded exchanges misses the structural dynamic. When you systematically destroy an adversary's air defense network, you're not just preventing them from shooting down your aircraft in the current engagement. You are changing the permanent strategic balance in the region. Iran's air defenses, once destroyed, take years and enormous resources to rebuild. Resources Iran does not have under current sanctions conditions. Every radar site eliminated, every air defense battery destroyed, every missile launcher struck is not a temporary operational victory. It is a permanent subtraction from Iran's strategic deterrent capability. Iran's leadership understands this, which is why the pressure to respond before those capabilities are fully gone is intensifying with every passing hour. And that is the thing that should be keeping serious analysts awake right now. The structural risk in the situation is not the strikes we can see. It is the decision-making dynamic inside the IRGC command structure as their deterrent capabilities are systematically reduced. There is a threshold. No one can state precisely where it is, beyond which Iran's remaining retaliatory capability falls below what its leadership calculates is necessary to deter further American strikes. Once Iran's leadership believes that threshold has been crossed, the strategic calculus changes in a way that becomes very difficult to model from the outside. A leadership that believes it has already lost its deterrent capacity has much less to lose from extreme escalation than a leadership that believes it still has significant capability to deploy. The danger is not rational escalation for strategic gain. The danger is escalation that emerges from the specific desperation of watching your military capability get eroded strike by strike, knowing that each hour of inaction produces further degradation. Command fragmentation is the other variable that sits beneath the surface of every public statement and official casualty report. The IRGC is not a monolithic institution. It has competing power centers, competing commanders with competing assessments of how to respond, and a history of units operating with significant autonomy at the tactical level. In a high-intensity conflict period where communication channels are under stress, where commanders are managing active operations, where physical infrastructure may have been damaged in strikes, the risk of a unit somewhere in the system making an unauthorized or poorly coordinated escalatory move is not zero. It may not even be small. The missiles that went up toward Bahrain and Jordan last night were authorized. The next escalatory move may come from a level of the system where authorization is assumed rather than confirmed. That is the unresolved variable that no official statement from either CENTCOM or the Iranian government can resolve because neither side fully controls it. Back to those missile trails in the sky over southern Iran, the footage from the overnight hours of July 13th. The IRGC released their own footage of the launches, their own documentation of the moment they fired ballistic missiles at the headquarters of the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet. They released it deliberately. They wanted the footage seen. That act of documentation and publication is itself a message. We did this, we are not hiding it, and we are prepared to own the consequences. Whatever comes next in the hours and days ahead, that footage is now a permanent artifact of a night when the Middle East moved decisively into a new phase of an old confrontation. The questions that footage does not answer are the ones that matter most. How many of those missiles hit something that matters? How much of Iran's remaining missile capacity was committed to these salvos? What does Iranian leadership decide to do in the next window of opportunity? And how does the United States respond to whatever that decision produces? As of July 14th, 2026, those questions do not have answers yet. But the missiles were real. The targets were real. And the silence that falls between artillery exchanges is never actually silence. It is the sound of both sides deciding what comes next.